today's episode of the Maverick Mystic Arts podcast, we are going to discuss attachment to technique, amalgamations of technique which form method, and amalgamations of method which form systems. So these have to do, of course, with the spiritual development. So, body scans. This would be an example of a technique, right? And this is a precursor to meditation, and we certainly don't want to confuse it for meditation, though very often the body scan, because it's so popular, is it's confused with Vipassana meditation because it is taught as the technique of Vipassana. Now, Vipassana typically refers to clarity or insight, right? The arising of spontaneous clarity and insight. And of course, you could go down the rabbit hole of many writings on Vipassana itself. However, the body scan specifically is a method to help develop body awareness, right? To develop sensory awareness and to train the mind. This is a very important part of the path, is the training of the mind. So when we are passing the attention through the body, right, when we're doing these types of scans, we are training the mind to adhere to that particular flow, right, to that particular speed that we might be passing the attention through the body with. And as we train the mind to not wander, we then are learning how to direct the flow of the mind or confine the movement of the mind, right, to particular streams of thought as well. So this can be profoundly beneficial when it comes to stirring up, because the mind has a type of weight to it, right? Where the attention goes, energy flows, as they say. And this gives the mind itself a type of weight. So as we move the weight of the mind through the body, it starts to stir up different blockages, different things that have been blocked that might exist at different layers of the physiology, right? And of course, of the mind and the emotions. So people can have profound change, profound healing occur simply from moving through a body scan method like this. You're learning to concentrate. You are aware of sensation. Because you're aware of sensation and looking for the emptiness beneath that sensation, or at least in many methods, the center of that sensation, which you find is an ever-moving thing, then what happens is we start to develop some distance from our preoccupations with our sensory perceptions, with our cravings, our aversions, our indifferences, all that kind of stuff. So again, tremendous potential value. And why is this? Because we can then move forward and start to see beyond our habitual aversions or cravings to certain sensory experience. And this can allow us to see a little more deeply and start to move away from addictive habits and tendencies that we might normally have engaged in. Now, once we move beyond this initial stage of training, this body scan technique, we need to be able to let go of it. Every technique typically has some particular goal in mind. It's training in a particular quality, right? A particular skill. And we've mentioned a few of those skills that can be developed through the body scan technique. However, we need to always look at what we are practicing. So what do I mean by that? What habits of association are being developed through any particular practice? What is the purpose of that practice? And how are we engaging with that practice? And if we are doing this practice for many hours a day, what habits of mind, of emotion, of body are we building into habitual experience? So with the body scan, it's very, very common. And this is just one of, innumerable techniques out there, but it's a very popular one. So that's why we're talking about it. So what are we typically practicing? Well, in the beginning, we are looking for sensation. So we are practicing separation, right? We are cultivating, in one sense, a hyperinflated ego because we can feel things, then we can dissolve things. And now there's a type of egoistic attachment, a lower identity attachment to stimulus and to the release of stimulus. So we start to deify the absence of sensation. And then, of course, we have the locking of the mind into the body, right? This practice of having the mind attend only to the body. And this can begin to, of course, deify sensation of the body and also deify identity with the body. The other part of this that we can be developing here is a type of detachment from sensory experience. So sensation brings with it information, right? The obvious example is hand on a hot stove and ouch, take your hand off the hot stove. Now you could go, this is just sensation until your hand catches fire or melts or whatever happens. But if you can be aware of sensory experience and apply active discernment, then you can make the call to pull your hand off, right? And so it's very common with these types of techniques when a practicer, when an adept attaches to the introductory techniques of practice and then applies their old beginner level understanding of the technique and tries to hold on to that as they keep progressing, that you can create a type of detachment and break your own ability to discern meaning from sensory experience, right? To break your ability to discern the meaning of mental experience, emotional experience, and of course, physical experience. Okay, so detachment almost becomes a doing thing at that point, and we start to take pride in our ability to be unfazed, right? And so this is where it's really important that we look at our own motivations and our own relationship to instructions that we might hear or read, or be taught or in any manner, because it's so easy for the lower aspects of identity to get involved and then use use a misunderstanding typically of those teachings as a means of supporting the identity, stabilizing the identity, and entrenching the identity. So if we are actively detaching from sensation, we are doing a thing, which is much different than not doing a thing or doing no thing, right? Both in its separation and nothing, as it's brought together. So we need to be aware of this. Okay, this we could say is different from non-attachment, which is not attaching to what arises. We could say that is different from detachment. Now, they're both kind of pointing at the same thing, but when you get into a lot of text, there's a tremendous amount of negation-based writing and speech because there is a difference between simply not engaging in attachment or actively engaging in detachment. So it depends on what your habits are, what is brighter in your habitual mindscape, feelingscape, bodyscape, etc. Right? Whatever is you're more used to, the energy will flow down that particular pathway. So some people have a habit of detachment, right? And so then we could apply the same non-detachment, right, as of equal value to non-attachment. And this is part and parcel with working through the path. So we're looking at the technique of body scanning, right? And of course, we mentioned at the beginning of this, there's a bunch of, in this area, it's a beautiful area, but there are these little no-see-ums, those little tiny biting bugs that are immune to screens and small enough to fly through them, and they're everywhere. So we're looking at the body scan, right? And I am scanning itchiness all over my skin. Now, there can be habitual body responses of inflammation, etc., to the types of bites and that kind of stuff. And through not attaching the identity to those sensations, we can then come to a more a greater equilibrium and equanimity within the sensations arising. Okay, and now let's look a little more at the doer, right? And this would be the one who is moving the mind through the body scan, right? Now, this would also be the one that is observing the sensation and that is then looking for the center of the sensation and looking for the emptiness as the sensation dissolves. When we are practicing the separation of experience and experiencer, like we mentioned, we can develop some very, very amazing insight about ourselves as we stop being wrapped up in the identity, the astral identity with all that stuff. But we are practicing separation. We are practicing distancing ourselves from the environment, from stimulus itself. This is much different than existing from emptiness itself. So the thing that is doing the meditation is the project, we could say. And the evolution, which is also the dissolution of that thing doing the meditation or doing the exercise, becomes very, very important. And so as you evolve, you can go back to beginner level techniques and they become something new and totally different. This is why it's so important to not attach to our initial comprehension and understanding, that initial cognition of what an instruction means. We have to allow that to evolve with us. So, when we're working with this, we have to move beyond the technique. And the thing that's doing the technique becomes much more important. So instead of practicing this separation of observer and observed, we then have a unification that can occur, right? We're not looking for the emptiness of sensation, the emptiness behind sensation, the dissolution of sensation, or trying to non-attach or detach or whatever from what we're experiencing. But the place from which everything arises becomes the identity itself, right? And identity and view become the same thing, right? Your evolution of view and emergence as that, with that, as that, becomes the quality of the meditation, the quality of the meditator. So then anything that does bubble up simply bubbles back down, right? The only thing that keeps that bubbling occurring, that bubbling up of samsaric experience occurring, is the latching on of the mind to that through the awareness that stimulates the mind latches on, and then any astral clinging and feelings and stories, that are created, around that whole experience, this all holds that bubbling up in place, right? And everything that is held there is now in contrast to the flow of the conditioning factors of time and space, is in contrast to that flow, that unblocked movement of energy that we can only start to work with as we move to greater and greater resonance with our personal Akashic consciousness, with emptiness, with the luminous nature of that emptiness, of that Akasha as well. This light, this progressively refining light that can arise from that, right? Blockages to that are created through mental adhesion and emotional adhesion, trying to lock something in place, right? And every time we go to impose an understanding, we are locking something in place. And by the very nature of trying to find solid ground to stand on and to understand on, right? Solid ground to comprehend on, to comprehend with, something to lean against. We are, by definition, removing ourselves from that infinite flow. So this infinite flow is in direct contrast to cognized understanding. The only path that can be walked is we could say, the more truer a path we are capable of walking, the more pathless that path becomes. You have to be able to progress with tremendous insecurity, like phenomenal insecurity. The embracing of the question, existing within the question, right? The infinite question, as it is of a finite infinity, and the macro infinite question. These fall into and out of themselves, into and out through themselves. We need to find comfort in this, right? So the adherence to technique is one of the big sticking points, because we attach to what we learn, especially when we start thinking of something as the right way to do a thing, right? We have an amalgamation of techniques which then make up a particular method. A method we might look at as like one of the 9 yogas of the Vajrayana system. We could look at each of those as a method, right? That amalgamation of methods make up the system. Now, every system will have its own amalgamation of methods. Each method will have its own amalgamation of techniques. And we need to move through these and beyond these. This is where having a good teacher can be important, so that you're given the next stage of the practice. Now, very intuitive students are able to start moving through a lot of this stuff without needing to have everything presented on a silver platter from a teacher, and you're able to start moving through this stuff. But attachment to our experience becomes an incredible debilitating force. Attachment to the efficacy of our experience, the rightness of our experience. And then from that comes a type of entitlement which keeps us lodged within the same subset of experiences. Moving beyond that, we have the non-experience, right? The non-perceptions. And when we're really working from a deep, infinite place, from that personal Akashic consciousness, from much more true non-dual relationships, which is, I know, a funny conjunction of a couple words, because relationships imply two and non-dual implies not two, but also it's not one, because one is definitive, so it's beyond that. this brings us into the nothingness, emptiness type of quality, and the light that comes out of that. And that light refines. So, I hope you found this helpful, engaging with your experiences, whatever practices you might be currently exploring, and that you find some sense of freedom within that, and that you're able to continue allowing the practice to evolve and allowing the practicer to evolve as well. Okay, so that's it for this one. If you're interested in training, please check out the website. That's www.taichiinstitute.ca. There is a retreat coming up in November. There is 1 week, 2 week, and 4 week options for that. And of course, the online courses, Tai Chi, Qi Gong, Hermetic Alchemy, meditation, and the Zen Den, where I get back to all of your questions via video answers. And there's hundreds of videos up there at this point, so you can peruse that and have some fun. Thanks for your time. See you on the next one. Bye.